The wind was at my back, the sun was out, and my driver felt like an extension of my arm. As soon as I hit that ball, I knew it was the one. It sailed like a missile, cutting through the air with that satisfying crack that made heads turn across the course. "Jesus, Marcus," Brent muttered, lowering his sunglasses to watch it fly. "You been hiding a cannon in that shoulder?" I shrugged, grinning. "I coach rugby on Sundays, not shuffleboard. My name's Marcus Dwyer. I'm 52. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and I've been a marine engineer for nearly 30 years. The kind who builds, fixes, and sometimes yells at ships until they behave." Brent, my boss and CEO of our shipyard operation, had invited me and a couple of other senior staff to a Friday round at Greenpoint Club. Honestly, I think he was trying to smooth things over after the whole takeover rumor started circling. There'd been talk, some conglomerate in Asia poking around, but nobody said it out loud yet. For a while, it was just golf, small talk, and a lot of polite lies about who had the better swing. I stayed out of it, kept my smile tight, and let the others joke. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I just wanted a few clean drives and maybe a beer at the turn. But then Brent got the message. We were on the 8th hole, and I was about to tee off again when he froze mid-laugh. His phone buzzed, just once, but it was enough to change the air around us. He looked down, stared, and then something went hollow in his face. He turned to me. "I need to leave." The other guys looked confused. I didn't ask questions. I just dropped my club, grabbed my keys, and said, "Come on. I'll drive." In the car, he didn't talk. He just stared out the window while I drove us back toward the yard. My mind was racing, but I didn't ask what was going on. I already had a gut feeling. "They make a move?" I asked finally, watching traffic roll by. He didn't answer at first. Then he let out a breath through his nose. "Not here. Not yet. But something's not right." We pulled up to the yard gates, the cranes in the distance frozen like metal skeletons under the heat. Brent got out without a word, phone already pressed to his ear. I stayed in the car a second longer, hand still on the wheel. I told myself I wasn't worried, that it was probably some corporate thing way above my pay grade. But deep down, I knew it. Something was about to break. And when it did, it wouldn't be small. I was about 5 minutes from home when I saw her. The sun had dipped just below the roof lines, casting long shadows across King Street. I had taken the long way home after dropping Brent off, partly to clear my head, partly because the silence of the truck felt better than walking into the unknown of whatever mess was waiting at headquarters. My phone had stayed silent. That made me more uneasy than anything. I was just passing the farmer's market by Reynolds Square when it happened. A soft thud, followed by startled gasps. I looked over and saw her, a woman in her late 60s, maybe early 70s, sprawled awkwardly on the sidewalk, one arm twisted beneath her and a bag of bruised apples rolling toward the curb. I hit the brakes and jumped out without thinking. "Ma'am," I called as I rushed over. "Are you hurt?" She tried to push herself up, but her face twisted with pain. I think I turned my ankle," she muttered. Her voice was strong but strained, like she was holding back from showing how bad it really was. A couple nearby looked like they might help, but they backed off when I knelt beside her. I offered her my hand. "Let's get you sitting up first." She was small, light, but tense with discomfort. Once I helped her onto the bench near the vendors, I noticed the swelling already blooming around her left ankle. Her purse was clutched to her side like a lifeline. "Should we call someone? An ambulance, maybe?" "No," she said quickly, waving it off. "I'll be fine. I just need a minute." "You can't walk on that," I said. "You need to get it looked at." She shook her head again, then sighed and leaned back, sweat beading along her brow. "I can't afford a hospital bill right now. And don't tell me about urgent care. They asked for a card first, too." That stopped me. She wasn't whining. She wasn't even fishing for sympathy. She just said it like a fact, one she'd accepted a long time ago. Something in her tone reminded me of my Aunt Lorraine. Tough as hell, proud as they come. She'd worked in a textile plant until her lungs gave out and still made you feel like she was doing fine. This woman had that same fire under her ribs. "My name's Marcus," I said, "and I'm not going to let you sit here and risk a blood clot just because the system's broken." She looked at me, skeptical but curious. "Rosalind." "Nice to meet you, Rosalind," I said, offering a faint smile. "Now, you've got two choices. You can either let me take you to the ER, or I can sit here and bother you about it until you give in." She let out a dry little laugh. "You always this pushy?" "Only with people who try to tough out fractured bones on a park bench." It took some convincing, but eventually she nodded. I helped her into my truck. Gently, carefully, and drove straight to St. Joseph's ER, where my wife Rebecca had worked for over 15 years. I figured if anyone could get someone seen fast, it'd be Rebecca or one of her coworkers. But when we got to the front desk and I dropped her name, the nurse's face blanked. "Rebecca Dwyer?" he asked. "She's not here. She's not on shift." I frowned. "She left about 2 hours ago," he said, checking the monitor again. Didn't say where she was going. That didn't sit right. Rebecca never just left early. If anything, she was the type to stay late, picking up extra hours when nurses were short. I didn't show it, but a knot started forming in my stomach. Rosalind got admitted quickly once I explained who I was and dropped a few polite favors to the staff. It helped that my wife's name still carried weight around here. She had built a good reputation, strict but fair, always watching out for patients who couldn't advocate for themselves. It made me proud. Usually, while I waited for an update, I tried calling her. No answer. I sent a text. "Everything okay? Heard you left early. Call me." I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she had a headache. Maybe Nina needed something. Maybe her phone was dead. But I'd seen that nurse's expression. The way he paused before saying she left. Not signed out. Not ended her shift. Just left. I sat back in the waiting area and watched the automatic doors slide open and shut. Rosalind was somewhere in the back, getting x-rays. I was glad I found her. That part made sense. But Rebecca being gone, that was something else. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening had already started. The house was quiet when I got home, which wasn't unusual. Nina had a dance club event after school, and Rebecca was still off the radar. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Her purse wasn't on the kitchen counter, and the house didn't carry the usual scent of her sandalwood diffuser. It smelled empty. I dropped my keys in the bowl and stood there for a long moment, staring at the silent living room. My phone was still quiet. I sat down at the dining table, elbows on the worn wood, and let the memories come. The ones I usually kept pushed into the far corners of my mind. Rebecca and I had met when we were both 22, taking night classes at community college, her for nursing, me for mechanical engineering. She had this curly red hair she kept tied back with a pencil, and she always wore scrubs even when it wasn't required. Practical, no nonsense, and kind of intimidating. I was shy back then, more used to machines than people. But she talked to me, asked me about torque ratios, and laughed at my clumsy jokes. She had this quiet way of listening that made you feel like you mattered. We started seeing each other more outside of class. Late-night study sessions turned into fast food runs and slow drives. We weren't fast and fiery like some couples. We built something slow, like laying bricks one by one. Then came Darren. He was in a few of our classes. Funny, cocky, the type who walked into a room like the lights got brighter because he was in it. I didn't like him, but I didn't say much. He hovered around Rebecca like a dog waiting for scraps. And for a while, she didn't seem to mind. I found out about them through a text she meant to send to him, but sent to me instead. That was a long time ago, maybe 27, 28. I was working nights on a dredging barge, trying to save up for our first apartment. She had told me they kissed, that it was stupid and didn't mean anything, and that it was over. She said it was because I was always working, always tired. We broke up for a few months. I dated someone else for a little while, a woman named Jess who worked at the harbor office. Nothing serious. I was angry, mostly at myself. But Rebecca reached out again, told me she had changed, that she missed me. That Darren had been a mistake. We got back together. Looking back, I don't know why I trusted it so quickly. Maybe I wanted to believe that people who hurt you could stop doing it. Maybe I wanted a future more than I wanted to be right. Over the years, we laid more bricks. Moved in together. Got married at 30. Had Nina 2 years later. We worked. We paid bills. We loved, in that quiet, determined way people love after they've already broken once. But I had rules after that. Simple ones. No close friendships with the opposite sex. No private lunches. No long texts that had to be explained. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't want to go through that again. If there was even a hint, I needed to know early. I was open about my boundaries, and she accepted them, even if she didn't fully understand. "This isn't how normal people do things," she said once. "I can't live my life in a bubble." I remember telling her, "It's not a bubble. It's a safeguard. For both of us." She rolled her eyes, but she agreed. Or said she did. Now, all these years later, I couldn't shake the feeling. That tightness in my gut. Rebecca leaving early, no calls, no text. No sign of where she'd gone or why. I knew her habits. If she was angry, she'd slam a drawer or clatter dishes. If she was tired, she'd crash on the couch in her scrubs with the remote still in her hand. But silence. Disappearing with no explanation? That wasn't her. Unless something was happening again. I thought of Darren. I hadn't heard his name in years. Last I knew, he moved to Atlanta, got married, then divorced 6 months later. We never talked about him anymore. He was a ghost. But ghosts had a funny way of showing up when you least expected them. I got up, checked the driveway again, and called her once more. Straight to voicemail. I thought about the last time we'd been together, really together, not just in the same house. A few weeks ago, maybe, at Nina's school fundraiser. We posed for pictures. Smiled. But now that I looked back, her hand wasn't in mine the way it used to be. She had stood just far enough away that our arms didn't touch. I poured a glass of water, sipped it, and stared at the kitchen window. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to feel this tight, ugly thing crawling up my throat. But I'd lived long enough to know. Sometimes you feel the storm long before you hear the thunder. And tonight, the air felt heavy. Something was coming. By the time Rebecca still hadn't come home that night, I had stopped pacing. Instead, I just sat in the living room, phone on the armrest, checking it every few minutes even though I knew it hadn't buzzed. I didn't want to talk to anyone, but I couldn't sit in silence either. I needed to do something, anything. So I called Nina. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Dad, what's up? Everything okay?" Yeah, I said quickly, not wanting to alarm her. "Listen, I need a favor. There's a woman, her name's Rosalind. She had a fall this evening, and I brought her to the ER. She can't go home tonight. Long story, but I offered to let her rest at our place until we figure something out. Can you help me get her settled when I bring her by?" There was a pause, then, "Sure. Is she okay?" "She's tough," I said, managing a half smile. "But she needs a couch and some peace." 15 minutes later, I pulled up to the house with Rosalind in the passenger seat, her foot in a soft cast, and a paper hospital bag with her belongings crinkling in her lap. "This is too much," she said quietly as we parked. "You don't even know me." "I know you needed someone," I said. "That's enough." Inside, Nina was already moving blankets and pillows to the living room couch. When Rosalind hobbled in on crutches, Nina smiled and said, "Hi, I'm Nina. I made tea, if you like peppermint." Rosalind's face softened. "I used to make peppermint tea when my granddaughter got sick. She said it smelled like Christmas." "Well, then this must be fate," Nina said, helping her sit. They clicked fast. Within an hour, they were deep in conversation about books and school and what Rosalind called the golden age of Motown. Nina laughed, relaxed in that way she hadn't been lately, and I watched from the hallway, grateful for the distraction, even if my mind was still spinning. It was late when the doorbell rang again. I opened the door, and there she was, tall, slender, thoughtful eyes. Rosalind's granddaughter. "I'm Camille," she said, a little breathless. "My grandma called and told me what happened. I hope it's okay I came." "Of course," I said, stepping aside. She walked in carefully, a satchel slung over her shoulder, and paused when she saw Rosalind on the couch sipping tea like she'd lived here for weeks. Then she smiled. "Still causing trouble, I see." Rosalind rolled her eyes. "I fall down once, and suddenly I'm a national emergency." Camille turned to me. "Thank you for taking care of her." I shrugged. Right place, right time. We ended up talking for a while. Camille was a graduate student in education. Sharp, calm, the kind of person who listens more than she speaks. She had a quiet confidence, like someone who'd been through a few storms and learned how to stand still in the middle of them. "You didn't have to go this far," she said after a bit. "Most people wouldn't." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and muttered. It felt like the right thing. We ended up making a second round of tea, and when Rosalind finally fell asleep under Nina's old quilt, the three of us sat in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge the only real sound between us. It wasn't what I expected from the night, and I should have felt uneasy or awkward, but I didn't. Camille leaned on the counter, arms crossed, and smiled in this soft, honest way. "You're a good man, Mr. Dwyer." "Marcus," I said. "Please." "Mr. Dwyer makes me sound like I'm 80 and run a lumber mill." She laughed, and I did too, real laughter, the kind that loosened something inside my chest. She had this way of putting you at ease without even trying. But even as we stood there talking, a part of my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere darker. Because Rebecca still hadn't come home. She hadn't called, hadn't texted. I didn't know if she was at a friend's place, or at the hospital catching up on work, or somewhere else, with someone else. I caught Camille watching me, not in a nosy way, just observant. "You okay?" she asked. "Just tired," I lied. She nodded, didn't push. The clock ticked past midnight. Nina headed to bed. Rosalind was out cold. Camille said she'd stay for a while, just in case her grandmother woke up confused or scared. So I gave her the guest blanket and the recliner and said goodnight. But as I lay in bed, alone, staring at the ceiling fan spin, I kept wondering where Rebecca was, and whether the silence between us had finally turned into something more than just quiet. It was Saturday afternoon, and the air in Charleston was thick with that early summer heat that made everything feel slower, heavier. Nina had gone to a friend's house for the day. Camille and Rosalind were still at the house, Rosalind mostly resting, Camille quietly folding laundry in the den like she'd lived there for years. It didn't feel intrusive. If anything, it was comforting. Still, I needed space. I needed to think. So I drove to the wine shop near the pier. I wasn't even planning to buy anything. I just liked the stillness there, the cool air, the polished wood floors, the low jazz humming from the speakers. Familiar. Predictable. The opposite of everything else right now. I was near the back, staring at a bottle of Spanish red I couldn't pronounce when I heard the voice. And then she tells me she's married. Like I didn't already know. It stopped me cold. I turned slowly, heart hammering. The voice was unmistakable. Smooth. Arrogant. Too loud for the room. Darren. He was standing near the tasting counter, laughing with a balding guy in a polo shirt. The kind of laugh that begged for attention. I ducked behind a display, my ears straining. "Honestly," Darren said, swirling a glass of Pinot, "she came to me. Not the other way around. I mean, yeah, she's married. But come on. Everyone wants something more eventually, right?" The other guy snorted. "You're playing with fire." Darren shrugged. "She said her husband was checked out. Emotionally. That he doesn't get it anymore. That he's too rigid." I didn't ask for details. The room spun a little. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But my gut screamed louder than anything I'd heard in weeks. He was talking about Rebecca. He had to be. I stepped out of the aisle, slowly made my way toward the counter like I was browsing. He didn't notice me. He was too busy performing. "She said it's not about sex," he said. "It's emotional intimacy." That's what she called it. Emotional intimacy and collaboration. Whatever helps her sleep at night. I walked out without buying anything. Got in my truck. And I called Greg Tanner, a guy I'd gone to high school with who now ran a PI service for insurance fraud and divorce attorneys. "Greg," I said, voice low, "I need to hire you for something." That night, I told Camille I had some work to do. She didn't ask questions. Just nodded, respectful as always. I stayed in the garage, pretending to sort tools while I stared at the cement floor, trying not to lose it. 3 days later, Greg called me back. "Yeah," he said. "She's been meeting with him. Same guy you mentioned. Darren something. Usually midweek, around noon. Always the same cafe on Broad, corner booth, far side." I clenched my jaw. "Is it physical?" I asked. Greg hesitated. "They're not kissing in public. But the body language? Close. Hands touching. Whispering. I've seen it before. If it's not physical, it's heading there." He emailed me pictures. And there they were, Rebecca and Darren, heads bent close together, coffees half drunk. Her expression soft. Familiar. Not like someone talking to a colleague. Like someone letting their guard down. I stared at the images until my eyes burned. Later that night, when she finally came home, 12 hours late, no explanation, her scrubs wrinkled and a bag of leftovers in hand, I didn't ask where she'd been. I just waited until Nina was asleep, until Camille was in the back room helping Rosalind to bed, and then I met Rebecca in the kitchen. "Who is he?" I asked. She froze. "What? You know who I mean. Who is he?" Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I already know," I said quietly. "I just want to hear it from you." There was a long silence. Then she sank into a chair. "Nothing happened," she said. "We've just been talking." "About what?" "About life. About stress. About how I feel like a ghost in my own house." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So why him?" She looked at me. I suddenly wet. "Because he listens." I let that sink in. "You could have talked to me," I said. "I tried," she whispered. "But you were always so careful. So measured. You made everything feel like a checklist. Boundaries. Protocols. Like love had to pass through quality control." I didn't say anything, just stared at the floor. Then, slowly, I sat across from her. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I knew it would break you, she said. And I didn't want to be the one to do that. Too late. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just stood up and said, you need to decide what you want. Because if this is the path you've chosen, I'm not standing in your way. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked away. And that told me everything. It started with a text from my brother-in-law, Dave. Hey man, we're all getting together at your parents' place Sunday. Thought it'd be good to talk. Nothing heavy. Just family stuff. Rebecca will be there. Hope you can make it. I knew what it was. The wording was gentle, but the setup was loud and clear, an intervention. Not the kind with tissues and support. The kind where people mean well, but spend the whole afternoon telling you why you're wrong. I should have ignored it. Instead, I went. Sunday afternoon, I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house I grew up in still had the same cracked sidewalk and the same lopsided hydrangeas Mom refused to trim. But as I stepped up to the front door, it didn't feel like home. Not anymore. Inside, everyone was already there. My mother, my father, Rebecca, her sister, Kelly, Dave, even my aunt, for some reason. Nina sat on the couch, arms crossed, jaw tight. Everyone stopped talking when I walked in. Hey, Rebecca said softly. I nodded but didn't say anything. We all gathered in the living room. The air was too quiet, too polite, like the moments before a storm. My dad cleared his throat. Son, we thought it might be good to talk this out. As a family, my mother chimed in. Sometimes people make mistakes. That doesn't mean you throw everything away. Kelly jumped in next. Rebecca's hurting too. You both are. Maybe this is just a bump. A bump? I looked around the room. Everyone seemed to be operating off the same playbook. A quiet little script where Rebecca's betrayal was an unfortunate accident, and I was supposed to be the bigger person and smooth it all over. Rebecca looked at me. I just wanted to explain. I held up a hand. You already did, but not with everyone here. You want to do this as a group? I asked, voice low. With an audience? Dave tried to help. We all just want to see you two work it out. I nodded slowly. Right. Because it's more comfortable for all of you if I forgive and forget. Makes the holidays easier. My aunt frowned. Marcus, don't be cruel. I'm not being cruel, I said calmly. I'm being honest. Rebecca reached out like she was going to touch my hand, then thought better of it. I made a mistake. No, I corrected. You made a choice. Over and over again. It didn't happen once. It happened across multiple lunches, messages, meetings. Don't soften it now. Okay, she whispered. But we can fix this. With time. I looked at Nina. She hadn't said a word. Just stared at the floor, her shoulders tight. Nina, I said. Do you want to say anything? She looked up, eyes sharp. You mean besides the fact that Mom lied to us for months? That she let some guy put his hands on her and then came home and acted like nothing happened? Rebecca's face collapsed. Honey, it wasn't like that. You're right, Nina snapped. It was worse. Because it wasn't even about love. It was about needing attention. My mom interjected, she's still your mother. Then she should have acted like it, Nina said flatly. Silence. I turned to my parents. Let me ask you something. If this had happened to Dave, if Kelly had lied to him for weeks and gone behind his back, would you be sitting here asking him to forgive her? Nobody answered. I didn't think so. I stood. I'm not playing this game. I'm not going to sit here while everyone tries to make this comfortable. It's not supposed to be. Rebecca's voice cracked. So that's it. I looked at her. You broke something that doesn't get taped back together, I said. I don't hate you. I'm not here to punish you. But I'm done being the one who holds the damn line for everyone else. I walked out. Nina followed me. As we got into the truck, she buckled her seatbelt and said, That was brutal. You okay? I asked. She nodded. Are you? I didn't answer right away. Just stared at the house in the rearview mirror. I'm getting there. That night, I packed my things. I didn't make a big show of it. Just clothes, tools, a few photos. I left Rebecca a note. You know where to find me. But I won't be waiting. I found a short-term rental near the shipyard. Nothing fancy. Just quiet. Nina stayed with me for a few days. I didn't ask. She just showed up with a duffel bag and her favorite hoodie and said, Mom says I'm punishing her. I told her I'm just choosing peace. I laughed. You sound like me. She smiled. That's not the worst thing. I cut off contact with everyone but Nina, even my own mother. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing them. And the silence? It was the first peace I'd felt in years. A month passed. I didn't mark the days exactly, but I felt them. In how easily I slept. In how quiet the mornings were. In how often I'd catch myself not thinking about Rebecca at all. Nina split her time between our house and her mom's, but she stayed with me more than not. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell something about her mother's house made her restless now. Maybe it was guilt, or tension, or just the way a daughter sees the truth faster than anyone else. We didn't talk about it too much. She'd just say, "Can I crash at your place this week?" And I'd nod. In between work and home, I found myself spending more time with Camille and Rosalind. What started as check-ins became coffee. Coffee became dinner. Then dinners turned into something else entirely. I wasn't trying to fill a void. That's not what it was. Camille never pushed, never leaned too close, never acted like she was there for any reason other than being who she was. Gentle, steady, quietly observant. She had a way of asking questions that made you think harder about your answers. She'd drop by with fresh bread from the co-op bakery, or show up with a used book she thought I'd like, dog-eared with little notes in the margins. She had a kind of presence that didn't demand attention but made you want to give it anyway. We'd sit on the porch some evenings, talking about nothing, work, her school program, Rosalind's stubbornness about taking her medication. "You're good with people," she told me once. I scoffed. "I work with steel and diesel engines. They don't talk back." She smiled. "You listen better than most people who talk for a living." Sometimes, Nina would sit with us, chiming in between text messages. Other times, it was just me and Camille, 2 chairs, 1 shared pot of coffee, and a quiet comfort I hadn't known I missed until I had it again. Meanwhile, Rebecca unraveled. I didn't hear from her directly, but word got around. The affair, if that's even the right word anymore, had become public. Darren had been spotted with her at a hotel by one of the ER nurses. The whispers reached administration. Patients complained. HR got involved. Her shifts got cut. Then came the disciplinary hearings. Kelly, her sister, called Nina and warned her not to tell me everything. So, of course, Nina told me everything. "She's a mess," Nina said one night. "She cries all the time. Tries to act like it's work stress. But everyone knows." I didn't respond. She asked if I hate her, Nina added. I didn't answer. Camille didn't press me about Rebecca, but I think she could see it weighing on me. Not because I wanted Rebecca back. That ship had sailed, caught fire, and sunk. But because no matter how justified you are, watching someone you once loved crumble still bruises something in you. One afternoon, Camille and I were walking through the downtown farmers market. Rosalind had finally insisted on staying home alone for once. I don't need a babysitter just because my ankle's made of glass. We wandered past vendors, occasionally bumping shoulders, our conversation light. At one point, she stopped at a booth with vintage postcards. She thumbed through them like they were relics, her fingers careful. "Do you ever miss her?" she asked suddenly, without looking up. It caught me off guard. Not the question itself, but how gently she said it. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not the version of her now. I miss the version I thought she was." Camille nodded slowly. "That's fair." I turned to her. "What about you? Anyone you miss?" She looked away, her mouth tightening slightly. "My dad," she said finally. "He left when I was 10. Sent a birthday card once when I was 13. No return address. Haven't seen him since." "I'm sorry," I said. She shook her head. "I used to hate him. Then I realized I didn't really know him well enough to hate. That was worse." We stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by strangers and bright tomatoes and bees hovering over sunflowers. "I admire you," she said. "You didn't let betrayal harden you." I looked at her carefully. "You don't know that yet." She smiled. "I think I do." Later that week, we had dinner again at my place. Rosalind joined us for a bit, then excused herself to her favorite chair with an Afghan and a rerun of Jeopardy. Camille lingered while I did the dishes. We didn't talk much that evening, just moved around each other in that easy, domestic rhythm people fall into when they're comfortable. When she left, she touched my arm, not an accident. Her hand stayed there a second too long. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For making space for us. For being someone we could trust." I wanted to say something back, something that didn't sound stiff or rehearsed. But I didn't have the words yet. All I knew was this. The silence that had followed my marriage's collapse no longer felt like grief. It felt like clearing, like space for something new. And whatever was growing between me and Camille, I didn't need to name it yet. I just knew I wasn't alone in it. It was supposed to be just a normal afternoon. Nina had forgotten her phone charger at Rebecca's place. and I'd offered to drive her over to pick it up. We didn't speak much on the ride. She was tapping through messages, and I had the radio on low, the kind of background music you don't really hear. When we pulled up to the complex, I put the truck in park and said, "Want me to wait?" "I'll be 5 minutes," she said, grabbing her bag. If I'm not back, assume I got pulled into one of her guilt trip monologues. I chuckled. "I'll keep the engine running." She walked up the steps 2 at a time, then disappeared inside the building. I didn't even take off my seatbelt. Just leaned back and let my eyes close. Maybe 2 minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed. "Nina, Dad. Come up. Now." I sat up fast. My gut twisted. I didn't ask questions. Just got out of the truck and took the stairs 2 at a time. She met me at the door, her face tight. "Room 209, she said. "What?" "That's where they just went." I blinked. "Who?" She didn't answer. Just pointed toward the end of the hallway. I walked fast, heart pounding, mind racing, hoping I was wrong. But when we rounded the corner, I saw them. Rebecca and Darren, walking into room 209 of the Rosehill Inn, a budget hotel with a side entrance and tinted windows. She was in jeans and a hoodie. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low. They didn't look around. They didn't need to. They weren't hiding well. Nina froze. Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. I put a hand on her shoulder. "Go back to the truck." "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice low and shaking. We waited 5 minutes. Then I knocked. Hard. I heard movement inside. Then the door cracked open. Darren. His smirk died the moment he saw me. "Marcus," he said. "This probably looks." "Where's my wife?" I asked flatly. Rebecca appeared behind him, wide-eyed. Her face went pale the second she saw Nina behind me. She stepped into the doorway, blocking Darren with her body. "This isn't what it looks like," she said. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "You lied. For weeks. Maybe longer." "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. He understands me in ways you never." "Stop," I said sharply. "Do not say that to me. Not now." Nina stepped forward. "You lied to me. To Dad. To everyone." "I didn't want to hurt you," Rebecca pleaded. "I never wanted this to become public." I asked. "Inconvenient." She hesitated. I looked at Darren. "Get out of my sight." He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something clever, then thought better of it. He slipped past us down the hallway, head down. Rebecca stood there, still blocking the door. "Marcus," she said softly, "I know how this looks, but I need you to understand our marriage wasn't working. I was lonely. You're a good man, but you shut me out. You made everything about control, boundaries, rules. I needed something real." I stared at her, then looked at Nina, then back at Rebecca. "Was this your idea of real?" I asked. "Sneaking around like teenagers? Booking hotel rooms under fake names? Telling our daughter you're working double shifts while you play house with your ex?" She didn't answer. Nina's voice cracked. "You don't get to say you did this for yourself and then act like a victim. You broke everything. And now you want sympathy?" "I didn't want it to end this way," Rebecca whispered. "It's already ended," I said. "You just didn't have the decency to say it out loud." Nina turned to her. "You're not my mother right now." That hit harder than anything I'd said. Rebecca reached for her. "Please, don't say that." But Nina stepped back. "I don't want to see you for a while," she said. "Maybe ever." We left. No yelling. No slamming doors. Just silence. Back in the truck, Nina stared straight ahead. Her jaw clenched. I put a hand on her knee. "You okay?" She shook her head. "Not yet." "Me neither." That night, I packed the last of the boxes from the old house. Camille helped. Rosalind made tea and didn't ask questions. Rebecca tried to call. I let it ring. When the voicemail kicked in, she said, "Please don't do this. You're tearing our family apart." But I didn't have to respond. Because for the first time, Nina already had. And we were done letting guilt rewrite the truth. The divorce papers came through on a Thursday. There was no drama. No tears. Just a quiet envelope slid under the door by a courier and the thud of finality as I signed and slid the pen across the counter. That night, I stood out on the porch with a beer in my hand, watching the sun bleed over the marsh. Camille came out and leaned against the rail beside me, her hair tied back, arms folded like she'd been thinking about something for a while. "So," she said, "you're a free man." I nodded. "Legally and otherwise. You feel any different?" I considered that. The breeze rolled through the trees like a whispered conversation. "Lighter," I said finally. "Not happy. Not yet." but like I'm not dragging something behind me anymore. She didn't press. That was Camille's way. Never pushing, just waiting for you to say what you needed to say. We'd been seeing more of each other in the weeks since the blow-up. At first, it was subtle. Coffee and errands. Dinners with Rosalind. Then the dinners turned into late-night drives, and the drives turned into moments that lingered longer than they used to. But we never labeled anything. Maybe we were both too cautious. Maybe respectful. Maybe just scared. Then one Sunday, she asked if I'd take her for a drive in the old car, the vintage '68 Mustang I'd been slowly restoring since before Nina was born. It wasn't showroom perfect, but it ran smooth and had that deep growl you could feel in your chest. We cruised the coast, windows down, music low. Camille let her hair get messy in the wind, feet on the dash like she didn't have a single worry in the world. Somewhere near Edisto, we pulled over to a stretch of beach where the sand was still warm and the tide hadn't crept in yet. We sat on the hood, passing a bottle of iced tea, our shoulders brushing in a way that no longer felt accidental. "I don't know where this goes," I said quietly. She turned her head. "Neither do I. I'm not good at fast," I added, "and I've been through enough fire to know I'm still a little singed." Camille smiled at that. "Then we take it slow, like your Mustang." I chuckled. "It only looks fast. Truth is, I rebuilt it piece by piece. Took years. Maybe that's what makes it special," she said. It wasn't rushed. Back home, Nina was already waiting on the porch when we pulled up. She and Camille had developed this bond one hadn't expected. Different generations, different personalities, but united in quiet loyalty. Nina called her C now, casually, like she'd always been part of the family. As we all ate dinner that night, Camille, Nina, Rosalind, and me, I realized how strange and beautiful it was. I didn't build this moment on purpose. It just formed, out of kindness and slowness and shared scars. After Rosalind went to bed, Camille helped Nina clean up, and I just watched them. Two women who had no obligation to be in my life, but chose to stay anyway. Later, Nina sat beside me on the couch and said, "She makes you better." I looked at her. "Camille." Nina nodded. "You laugh more around her. You think I don't notice, but I do." "She's easy to be around," I said. "Not easy," Nina corrected. "Safe." I thought about that long after she went to bed. Safe. That's what Camille was. Not exciting in a fireworks and fury kind of way, but safe, like a harbor. Like I could finally drop anchor and not worry about the weather turning. The next morning, Camille brought donuts and sat across from me with her feet tucked under the chair. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always. Do you believe people get more than one great love?" I looked at her for a long time. "I think sometimes," I said slowly, "the second one teaches you what the first one should have felt like." She didn't reply, just smiled and reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. That was the thing with Camille. She didn't fill the silence, she honored it. And in that space, I found something better than noise. I found peace. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped looking back. 3 months later, I was named president of the company. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Brent pulled me into the glass-walled conference room, shut the door, and slid a sealed envelope across the table. I opened it, read the letter twice, and leaned back in my chair. "You sure about this?" I asked. Brent chuckled. "You've been running the yard in everything but title for the last year. All I did was make it official." I shook his hand. He clapped me on the shoulder, and we walked out of the office like nothing had changed. But inside, something had. It wasn't just the promotion. It was the fact that I'd finally built something, on my own terms, without compromising who I was to keep the peace. That meant more than the new title or the pay bump, or even the corner office I still hadn't moved into. That evening, we celebrated the only way I knew how, with good food, good people, and no speeches. I grilled steaks on the back patio. Nina made her famous mac and cheese. Camille brought her spinach salad that I always claimed to hate but finished every time. And Clara, my friend since high school, the one who always showed up when I needed someone, brought a bottle of scotch and gave me a long hug that said everything without saying a word. Rosalind sat under a blanket by the fire pit, sipping ginger ale and cracking wise about how she always knew I'd be somebody. Camille smiled and squeezed my hand. Later, when the food was cleared and Nina was showing Clara something on her phone, Camille pulled me aside. We stood near the porch steps, quiet and easy. "I've been thinking," she said. brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "Oh," she smiled. "Don't panic. It's not a big speech." I waited. "I want a future with you," she said simply. "Not tomorrow. Not next week. But someday." I nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing." She looked down at the space between us. "I'm not asking for a ring. I know. Just a path. A shared one." I took her hand, warm and sure in mine. "I can give you that," I said. "Not perfect. Not flashy. But honest." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "That's all I want." Back inside, Nina had put on music, and Clara had convinced Rosalind to dance from her chair with exaggerated arm movements. Everyone was laughing. I looked around the room. This odd little patchwork of people, some born into my life, others woven in by chance, but all of them chosen now. And me? I felt steady, like a compass finally pointing north. Camille raised her glass, and everyone followed. "To resilience," she said. "To second chances." "To honesty," Clara added. "To stake," Rosalind called out. We all laughed. Then Camille looked at me. "And to trust. The real kind." I lifted my glass. "To the life that comes after the storm," I said. We clinked glasses and drank, not like people celebrating an end, but like people honoring a beginning. No big declarations. No dramatic kisses. Just a shared glance between me and Camille, full of understanding. This wasn't the life I thought I'd have 5 years ago. It was better. Not louder. Not easier. But mine. Fully and finally mine. And that was enough.